When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does online business better than Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/income.
This episode is brought to you by Cars.com. On Cars.com, you can shop over 2 million cars. That means over 2 million new car possibilities, like making space for your growing family, becoming the type of person who takes spontaneous weekend camping trips, or upgrading your commute. Wherever life takes you next, or whoever you're looking to be, there's a car for that on Cars.com. Visit Cars.com to discover your next possibility.
Slow Burn Media, Evergreen Podcasts, and Killer Podcast presents Who Killed, a podcast that provides a voice for the voiceless.
After decades of despair, this morning a measure of relief for long grieving families.
I know now what happened, and that does ease my suffering.
DNA evidence providing investigators with a stunning break in the infamous yogurt shop murders, a cold case that has haunted Austin for 34 years. In 1991, 4 teenage girls were shot and set on fire in a yogurt shop. The crime shocking the city and leaving detectives empty-handed until now.
Austin lost its innocence the night those young souls became victims. Today, we have some closure.
Police say the killer was Robert Eugene Brashers, describing him as a serial killer with a gruesome criminal past. Among other evidence, detectives say they found Brashers' DNA underneath the fingernails of the youngest victim, 13-year-old Amy Ayers.
Hello and welcome back to Who Killed. I'm your host, Bill Huffman, and this is a very special week of Who Killed, because we are here to talk about one of the cases we have covered for a number of years, one that has gone unsolved for 30 plus years, and that is the Yogurt Shop 4. And this is a case that occurred in 1991 in Austin, Texas, and it involved the death of 4 young women, and the case remained unsolved until just recently. And who else to have on to discuss this case and the breakthrough? Well, you know who it is. It's Nick of True Crime Garage. So join me and Nick as we break down the latest in the Yogurt Shop 4. Hello and welcome back to a very special episode of Who Killed. I always used to love that when I was a kid, when they would say, welcome back to a special episode of Family Ties. Well, this is a special episode because we have huge breaking news in one of the most horrific cases we've probably ever covered, and that's the Austin Yogurt Shop murders. And on this week's episode to discuss that case is the one and only Nick Edwards from True Crime Garage. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, Bill, it's really good to be with you here today. Thank you for the invite and asking me to sit in with you once more on Who Killed. My favorite show to guest on, as the number of episodes that I've appeared on will justify that claim. But it was a huge pleasure to see you and all of our fellow podcasters at CrimeCon this year. What a great CrimeCon out in Denver. And you're originally from my neck of the woods, but now Denver is your neck of the woods. And I have to thank you because we're very lucky, right? There's so many beautiful states in this country, and Colorado is certainly a very beautiful state. And when you're there, you should be out driving around. It's very scenic every drive, and you were kind enough to take me out, and we had a little adventure for a day, and I got to see the landscape, and we went into a fantastic dive bar that I can't even remember the name of, and I think we both fell in love with that dive bar. It looked a little sketchy on the outside.
Hoppers.
Oh, big shout out to Hoppers. If you're
big
in
shout
the
out. And the bartender, he was full of good information, and
he should be like the ambassador of Colorado, because he was so welcoming and so knowledgeable, right? Like one of the smartest guys that I've randomly kind of met within the past several months. So
he certainly knew the business, knew the area, knew what he was talking about when it came to the bar business. And yeah, he was a pleasure to talk to. I forget his name, but shout out to the bartender at Hoppers in Wheat Ridge. And yeah, it was a good day. It was fun. It was really enjoyable to show you guys around. We went up to Boulder and took you on a nice little tour. And yeah, CrimeCon was great. Again, it was great to see the captain and all the other guys, crawl space guys and Renner and Generation Y, all the guys. But the Gaylord was beautiful, and unfortunately, I'm sorry for all the people that were there. You actually can see the mountains on a normal day, but apparently that weekend there was a whole lot of smoke from the Pacific Northwest, and I am sorry for that. I'm not in charge of the weather, but I do feel like they got ripped off from the beautiful scenic views that you get from that giant window at the Gaylord.
Sunday and Monday, I could see the mountains in the background. And so, absolutely beautiful, wonderful state. Highly recommend. Go to Denver. And if you're in the greater Denver area, go to Hoppers and have a great time. Good
times. But so we, if this news would have broken before CrimeCon, it would have been the talk of the con, but it did not, and it broke just last week. And again, as I mentioned, it's a huge break in the case, and it's the Austin Yogurt Shop murders. And you and I talked about this case about 4 or 5 years ago, and we talked about Beverly Lowry's book, Who Killed These Girls, which is an incredible read, even though they've got the guy, but it is an incredible book. Highly recommend it. And so, Nick, what were your thoughts when first there was, kind of like a rumor that there was a break in the case, and then to the fact that this guy that they named, Robert Eugene Brashers, is a serial killer and a bad dude?
Yeah. So, I mean, monster is the word that comes to mind when we think of Brashers, Robert Eugene Brashers, and the series of rapes and homicides that he committed during his time on, his time on this earth. Thankfully, he's no longer around. Shout out to the captain, because he's the one that sent me the information. He was the first one that I heard this from. I had been a little bit out of town, about an hour and a half south of where I live, and for the day, and traveled back that night. And when I got home, checking my phone, I was really surprised, because before I get into this, Bill, I do want to expand on something you said. Who Killed These Girls by Beverly Lowry, Cold Case, The Yogurt Shop Murders, the book that Bill just mentioned. Bill and I both huge fans of that book. It's an incredible book, like Bill was saying. I believe it to be one of the top 5 or 6 true crime books that I've ever consumed.
With all the detail and with the way that it's written, it is absolutely a turn pager. If I said that wrong, I apologize, but I know what you're saying, Nick. It's incredible. It is.
The research that Beverly Lowry put into the book, and then the way that she chose to lay it out, was really fantastic. And it really chronicled a case that I think you and I shared these concerns, especially when we had our conversation about the FBI and the YSTR DNA evidence in this case, that it chronicled a case that needed to be recorded, written, and told in this way, because I was getting concerned that this case would never be solved. And the complexities with this case, anybody that knows the case, I think they will agree with me saying that you can see the hurdles that would need to be cleared to solve this case to get where we are today. And I'm so thankful that Beverly Lowry put this book together, because it's great. They made the documentary, HBO did, which centered around portions of the book, but don't watch the documentary and think that you're getting a full, complete understanding of her book.
You're getting a snippet of what she really put into that. I mean, I totally agree. Top 10 true crime book of all time. I mean, just great.
Another good one too is Murdered Innocents by Corey Mitchell. It's a lesser known book about this case, and actually it was written years prior to Who Killed These Girls. So the information in it is quite different, but they really hone in. Corey Mitchell in his book hones in on the criminals from Mexico that were investigated, and really one part of the story that I think gets lost is that the criminals from Mexico, so they came up here and they committed some crimes. One of the crimes was an abduction and rape, and then they fled back to Mexico. And there were some similarities in the case, and I think that one of the perpetrators of those crimes, he looked very much like one of the composite sketches that came out in the yogurt shop case. Mm-hmm. And so they took a hard look at these guys, and really they did to those Mexican guys what they did to the four boys, two which were eventually tried and convicted here in the States, the Texas kids. Right. And maybe even on a more brutality type of level, because the reason why they never prosecuted these men from Mexico is the Mexican authorities wanted to try them there. And APD has done a lot of good things in this case and done some bad things in the case. Let's not sugarcoat it, right? Let's not just glaze over it.
It's part of what happens when a case of this magnitude hits a small town, and
this case took over that city.
4 murders of 4 young girls. I mean, we've talked about, obviously, the Mihalovic case. That's 1 girl in 1 town, and that took over the town. So just imagine the overwhelming amount of sadness and just feelings of despair, because they didn't know who did it. There's a monster running around.
And with these men from Mexico, the APD never charged them because Mexico wanted to charge them, but then APD wouldn't let them, because they go down there and they're talking to these guys, and you want to talk about, we've seen some of the confessions in this case from Michael Scott and from Robert Springsteen, and we can get into those guys a little bit more as we get into this case more, but these guys in Mexico got much more wrong in their air quotes confessions that were essentially beat out of them to the point they didn't even know how many victims there were. They thought there were 3 victims. I mean, that's a big red flag when your so-called perpetrators can't even come up with the right number of victims. And the Mexican authorities wanted APD to hand over everything they had on the case to them. And one thing that APD, Austin Police Department, did really well on this case, as desperate as they were to get this solved immediately and to find the persons who did this, the monsters who did this, and hold them accountable and show their faces to the public and say, look, we got them. This ain't going to happen again. This is what happens when you do this in our town. We get you. But the one thing they did that was very smart was they said, you know what? We don't like these confessions we're hearing from the Mexican authorities. And we're afraid if we give them what we got, because they had, I believe, 13 pieces of holdback information that all got leaked out over the years. So
right,
it was the information was good. They weren't so good at holding it back.
Yeah, that's it happens in a case that goes cold for as long as it did, and you're going to have leaks, and one of the reasons I'm sure they didn't want to give that information to the Mexican authorities is because they were going to just use it to railroad these guys.
They were going to supply it to these guys, right? They were going to put that information into their confessions.
Yep.
And APD was smart enough to recognize that and avoid that situation. Now,
no American police department would ever do something like that, though.
No. Well, in fact, the very same police department did the exact same thing, where several years later,
ironically,
we have some other detectives who really were. I don't know how much they were feeding information to Michael Scott and to Robert Springsteen, but they certainly were. What'd you tie them up with? Rope? No, that's not it. Come on, think harder. It was never giving them the answers. It was always telling them they're wrong and making them think harder. Think harder. Come on, try to remember. We know you're trying to remember. And they would say nope, nope, nope until they got the answer right. Yeah.
You look at those, the fact that they were actually convicted with this information, clearly they were coached, and they didn't even have the ability to charge the other two of the four that they wanted to charge. And then let's talk about the fact that it gets overturned or whatever, and the DA still wants to try him again. Like, they still want to do it. They still want to find out who it is. And it's just like, this went on for a decade. I mean, could you imagine being in that jackpot for 10 plus years where you are locked up for a number of those years, but just because of what you said, or, how that works, kind of tricked into saying. But yeah, it's a total miscarriage of justice. That one, I think, really gets glossed over, as far as now that we've caught the bad guy. Everybody kind of forgets about the people that paid the price along the way.
Yeah, it's and that's one thing that I'm curious about now here, Bill, because when the two men got released, when Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott got released, it was said that they could not pursue a lawsuit against the state for wrongful conviction, being locked up in prison, because the charges were essentially dropped, right? They found flaws in the trials and legal flaws. So they had to grant them appeals or a new trial. And then the prosecution decided, well, we're going to drop the charges against them because they were not exonerated. They were not able to pursue a lawsuit. Now, though, I'm curious, they're still not exonerated technically. However, you have the investigating agency saying Robert Eugene Brashers, dead serial killer, is solely responsible for these four murders. So it seems like to me that now, if they didn't have a case before, now they would.
Yeah, I definitely think that they have some grounds to stand on for sure. When we talk about this case, I mean, we didn't really talk about this at the beginning because we just kind of assume people are familiar with the case itself. But some of the facts about this case, it was four young girls, this happened in Austin. This was not, some major city at the time. And if anybody who's watched that HBO documentary will know that Austin has grown throughout the years. And, you know, this was two girls who were working and their friends, you know, sister and a friend. And I just can't even imagine what those families were thinking for all these years, for decades. I mean, we're talking about one individual. Like, what in the hell, you know, not to like dance around on it, but what was this guy doing? I mean, this guy's one bad dude. I mean, like, I hate to be like so blunt about it, but I mean, he freaking killed so many people.
Yeah. And
I mean,
these murders
and got away with it. Technically got away with it because he killed himself. But yeah, but these murders, go ahead.
And so just to add a little more detail for those maybe that
I just glossed over it.
hearing about this case for the first time or only hearing about it more recently because of the new information that came out. But
Sure.
Jennifer Harbison, Eliza Thomas, they were both 17 years old. They worked at a I Can't Believe It's Yogurt shop on West Anderson Lane in Austin, Texas. Now, I can't remember which of the two worked there first, but these two were friends. They were good friends. And one of them told the other one, hey, you should come get a job at this yogurt shop with me. It's easy. It's fun. And we can work together. You know how it is when you're a teenager and you want to go work with your buddies because you're hanging out and you get to make a little bit of cash, get a little bit of work experience all at the same time.
Yeah, we all got to work at the city or at the pool as lifeguards. That was, yeah. But yeah, absolutely.
So, and they're getting to work at this great shop. It was owned by a regional business there. They owned several of these yogurt shops.
They had a good decent sized chain, didn't they?
Yeah, I can't remember how many shops. It was a brother and sister.
There were a bunch of these in the early 90s because I remember in Ohio we had TCBY, which this cannot be yogurt or so. What I don't even remember, but it was TCBY. But it was all these different mom and pop. It was like before Blockbuster and Hollywood Video took over when there were mom and pop, ice cream places and yeah, dude.
That's funny that you say that because when we first covered it on True Crime Garage, now this would have been like 2017, I think. Mm-hmm. I kept screwing up the name of I Can't Believe It's Yogurt because, like you said, in Ohio we had two different frozen yogurt chains, and they had similar names to this, but they were slightly different. And I kept jumbling up the different names altogether. But yeah, you were right. It was like, this is ICBY, and we had TC something.
I know that Rocky River had TCBY, and okay. I still don't even. But this cannot be yogurt. I don't know. But at the end of the day, I remember it was just the biggest fad or whatever. It was such a hit at that time that these places popped up all over the country. So
well, and it was great too because you could go in with just a few bucks. Right. Mm-hmm. We would go there as kids, ride our bikes up to it, up to the store, because you could go in there with $3 or $4 and get something. Right. Yeah. You didn't have to have a whole lot of money to go in there. And I think there was some kind of frozen yogurt sandwich, like an ice cream sandwich that they had that was amazing. It was between two chocolate chip cookies, and it was incredible. And that was like the thing that I got all the time. And then there would always be some jerk kid that would be like up there trying to sample as many flavors as they can for free,
and getting all the different toppings. I mean, we're waxing nostalgic about our frozen yogurt days and the rise of frozen yogurt.
So these two good friends, both 17 years old, they're working together at this yogurt shop. And in fact, one of them was supposed to have the night off. Every time we cover one of these stories where it's at the Burger Chef or it's at the Brown's Chicken or the Kentucky Fried Chicken. We did a Kentucky Fried Chicken murders case in Texas that took place in Texas as well. I think it was 1983, going off of memory. But there's always that story of somebody that called off, or they got sick and didn't go in, so their life was spared in some weird roundabout way. And then there's somebody that was not supposed to work but covered for somebody and ends up being a victim. Here, it's similar where the manager or the assistant manager, it was her regular night, and she had the night off for some previous engagement, and one of these 17-year-old girls covered for her that night. So we have the two friends, Eliza and Jennifer, working together that night. And as you said, Jennifer's younger sister, Sarah, who was 15, and her friend Amy Ayers, who is 13, they show up at the shop that night. And it was, they show up at the shop because they're going to catch a ride home with Jennifer, and Amy Ayers is going to stay the night at the Harbison house. And so the two younger victims are only there to get this ride. And based off of Beverly Lowry's book, it's believed that the two younger girls would have just hung out in the back area. So you have a front of the house and a back of the house.
Yep.
Hang out in the back, and probably would have helped them with the closing duties to speed things up so everybody can get out of there faster than normal. Now, the shop closes at 11 p.m. Let's fast forward 42 minutes later. And between the two books and between the docu-series that recently came out and some of the episodes about this case on 48 Hours, this number varies by only a few minutes. But I'm going to go with 42 minutes because that's the one I've seen most reported. That's when a call goes into emergency services that somebody, it was an officer that was on patrol, spotted a fire. Now, he was very new to the force, and he actually gave out an address that was incorrect. And so they're responding to this fire. They're a little bit delayed because they have the incorrect address. But when you're showing up to a place that sells food, these guys are anticipating that it's their run-of-the-mill
grease fire.
Midnight grease fire. Somebody left a stove top on or left something on. It caught fire after everybody left, and we're just going to go here, hose it down, and we'll be in and out.
Right.
And that's not the case. When they get there, they find the front door of the business locked. They find the back door to the business, which leads into an alleyway. So they're in like a plaza, strip mall type setup where there's shops that are next door to them as well. And so the alley runs behind all of these different shops, and they're putting out the fire. They're going in there, knocking it down, I think is how the firefighters referred to it on 48 Hours and in Beverly Lowry's book, knocking it down. And when one of them sees a foot, and then they decide, keep in mind that, they're powerful hoses, fire hoses, putting out this fire, trying to extinguish the flames. So they are unaware that they're destroying evidence as they are attempting to put out the fire. So I hate
no fault of them,
no fault of theirs at all. And I hate to give kudos to the killer here, but he clearly set the fire as an attempt to destroy that evidence. And they're knocking down the fire, and one of the firefighters says to the other one, like, there's something very wrong here. Like, gets this feeling right away that there's something very wrong here. We need to stop what we're doing. We need to get out of here, and we need to call police and get police here with us. And the case was a little mishandled from the beginning. There was some potential evidence that went missing. But again, it's also the call that nobody ever expects that they're going to get. There are people that serve and protect in their areas for 20, 30 years of their life, and they never thank God they never get a call like this. This is to go through Detective Jones's, he's the only homicide robbery detective on that night. So he gets the call. He catches this case, as they call it. And when he's phoning it in back to headquarters. I mean, it's terrifying. It's horrific to hear him having to phone this in. He's saying arson. I think he says 3 homicides.
Yeah, they
suspected sexual assault, suspected gun murders, and then while he's trying to phone it, somebody finds the 4th body.
Yeah, I was going to say, because they originally thought it was just 3 bodies, and the 4th body, I think they were they stacked on top of one another, or something like that, or was
so
just
two
one of them.
2 of the girls were lying sort of next to one another.
Okay.
And all 4 of them had been shot in the head. 3 of them shot with a 20. All 4 of them shot with a 22, and Amy Ayers was also shot with a 380. And 2 of the girls were lying next to one another, and I believe it was Sarah Harbinson who, the way that they describe it, I understand why they describe it this way, but I don't understand. The description doesn't provide me with much of insight of how she would have been lying there, but she is essentially on top of one of those 2 girls that are next to each other. And They describe it as she was left in an unnatural way. So they believe that the perpetrator must have tried to drag her or toss her on top of where she was found. So unlike the other 2, where they suspect they were laying where they were killed. And so Sarah's found in this unnatural way, as it's described. And then Amy Ayers is a little bit away from the other girls. In some tellings of this story, it makes it sound like she's found very far from the other 3. She's found much closer than how it's described. She was found like 4 or 5 feet from the other girls. And if you look at a diagram, which there's plenty of them online, of the yogurt shop itself, it's got like a floor plan, and then you can see where the 4 bodies are. And even in that depiction, it looks a little further away than what she actually was. But I mean, the case is, it was a true whodunit, and it's one of those types of cases that you can look at, and there's a lot of different information out there, and some of it very good information. But because you had so many people coming and going in that store, in that shop that night, you have a lot of witnesses, not to the crime, but you have witnesses to tell us what was going on when they entered the store, when they got their frozen treat. Some people staying there and eating it there, some people going home. And they did a really good job with tracking down, using the receipts for the sales to track down customers for that night and try to figure out what happened. And then you had the speculation of, well, how did the killer or killers get into the shop? Was the shop already closed and they managed to get in through the back door? Were they potentially already in the shop? That was one theory that we weren't the first to present it, but we did present that theory on True Crime Garage, and that one seemed to have some legs for a while. Now, with the new information that's coming out, I think we're back to square one on how he was able to access the shop. That was part that we didn't get in the press conference that was held on Monday of this week by the Austin PD.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, okay, so like similarities obviously to lots of different cases, but the idea that he would be in there waiting, somehow get in the back door, makes you wonder, was he in there earlier that night? Or was he the last customer and then had them lock the door under duress? Or but that doesn't make sense much either, because some of the chairs were put up, weren't there?
Yeah. So all of the chairs were put up except for 2 of them, and then they would move the napkin container as well. So you're resetting all the tables, and part of the closing duties was to stack the chairs onto the tables, and then you mop the floor.
Yeah.
And when they found when they found the shop after the murders took place, again, keep in mind, closes at 11. The fire's called in at 42 at 11:42. So all of the horrible, terrible shit that happened inside of that store happened very quickly. Happened between 11 and 11:42, and you could probably shave about 5 minutes off of that, because that's when people were seeing the smoke coming from. I would guess, easily by 11:42 that the perpetrator had. I would say not only successfully set the fire, he was already gone.
Oh, he was gone by. My guess is he was gone soon after he set the fire, for obvious reasons. But the idea that I think that does make the idea that he did come in through the back door much more realistic and much more of a possibility, which makes me wonder if he had been casing out the joint. Because if you look at his timeline of crimes, this would have been pretty early on in his, it would have been like, he got convicted of attempted murder, got sentenced to 12 years, but only did 3. He got out in 89 and then committed these murders in 91. So if he would have just served a sentence, this case would have never have happened.
Correct.
But yeah, you look at his MO and the way that he was a vicious, sadistic killer, obviously a sexual deviant as well. He is, once they got his DNA, they connected him to all sorts of stuff. But to think that he would take on 4 girls, it makes you wonder, was he by himself? Or did he have an accomplice?
Well,
but if you have a gun, you can control 4 people. It's not that hard.
So the captain and I did an episode on this after this good news came out, and we squabbled a little bit on our episode because I have a hard time with some of the information in this case, and the way that it's been handled over the years makes me call a lot of things into question. I don't question that this Robert Eugene Brashers is responsible. Mm-hmm. I question, was he alone or not?
Yes.
And the reason I question that, and look, when I'm wrong, I say I'm wrong. And even though I squabbled with the captain a little bit, I want to make clear here, the captain's not wrong in his opinion and his view of this information. He's not wrong. Everything he said was right. Everything he said is what Austin PD is telling us today. But where my pushback was okay, well, up until 48 hours, 72 hours ago, the information that we were getting was different. Why is that? I don't want just this explanation of who did it. I want an explanation of why has the evidence, or I shouldn't say evidence, changed. It shouldn't be called evidence. The proper term would be information, the information that was out there. Because since 2000, I believe it was 2011, it was put out that they had 2 DNA profiles. Unidentified DNA profiles, 2 of them.
Yes.
And so that tells us that, I've avoided saying this as much as I can. I'm not going to go into the details of it because they're very graphic about this information. If you dig deep enough, you can find it. But it's all they know for a fact that 3 of the 4 girls were raped. It's presumed all 4 of them were. One of the girls was charred so badly from the fire that it was difficult to tell what had been done prior to the fire.
Which
now
leads you to believe she was probably set on fire first to hide that evidence.
Well, yeah. So at the very least, she was closest to the fire. She was closest to the heat. And the fire was really burning. It wasn't, so people that don't know this case, don't picture the entire store, the entire building inflamed. It's a portion of the store. The back portion, it was almost like a corner, like a wall. And when I said that they kind of screwed some of this shit up from the beginning, well, I believe the fire started on the storage shelves there, and those stored, and the reason being, and we went through this in great detail on True Crime Garage in our most recent coverage that came out, not our most recent coverage, our coverage that came out after the docuseries came out, because the docuseries on HBO, they did a great job with it, but it's a lot about the victims and a lot about the victims' families, and not so much about the investigation or the evidence or the case itself.
Right.
And one thing that I wanted our audience to be aware of was where the fire started, and we can prove on some just scientific facts where the fire started. That shelving unit was made of stainless steel, which it melts at a much higher temperature than a lot of the other burned items in that back portion of the store. So that's an indicator to us that shelving unit was closest to the fire before it was extinguished. And therefore, I believe that the fire was set either right by the shelf and it eventually caught on fire itself, because that shelving unit, Bill, was filled with like
paper products,
paper cups, napkins, a lot of paper products that boom, just go up in flames.
It's a tinderbox.
Yes. And again, here's where I have a problem with the current information. The DNA matches this Robert Eugene Brashers. That's not in question. No. I believe that the APD wouldn't tell us that if that weren't the case. That's 100%.
And his MO lines up.
Exactly. His MO, and let's circle back around to that, because we were talking about that, and you know how I get way out in the middle of nowhere. I get in the weeds, Bill.
Never.
Never. But the DNA before was telling us two profiles, and the reason why I have an issue with that is, well, what happened? And look,
what happened to the other profile?
People that know this case very well know that information came from the defense. So we should probably talk briefly about Robert Burns Springsteen and Michael James Scott. Shout out to the Office fans out there and fans of The Boss, but these people are nothing to do with either of those. This is a real life Michael James Scott. Robert Burns Springsteen and Michael James Scott, they went to trial. They were convicted. They originally were going to charge two of their friends, which is weird because Maurice Pierce was one of those friends, and Forrest
Wellborn.
Thank you. Those two men were what led them to Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen. But they never charge or did drop the charges against Maurice Pierce and Forrest Wellborn, because Forrest Wellborn, I don't think they ever even charged him. Maurice Pierce, I believe they charged him and then dropped the charges and decided not to go to trial. And in both of those guys, they're like, we don't have enough evidence to take them to court, but we believe that the four of these guys together committed these murders, that they figured out a way that they went into the store, wedged, Jimmy rigged that back door so they could access it then later, and went in the back door, 4 versus 4 teenage boys against 4 teenage girls. They're armed. They have the upper hand, and this is what they did to these poor victims here, set the place on fire and fled. That was APD's stance, at least by the individuals that decided to charge these guys for many years. And so much so, it's so damn weird, though, because your initial thing that you're investigating is Maurice Pierce is found with a .22. He's walking around the shopping mall. He's an idiot teenager. I can call him that because I was one myself.
Yeah.
I wish it was not too long ago that I was an idiot teenager, but
we're teenagers at heart.
He's walking around the shopping mall with a gun because he's an idiot. He gets caught because he's an idiot. And police, APB, they're like, wait a second. We picked up this kid with a gun, a .22 that matches our caliber of murder weapon, one of the calibers anyway. And this is just a week later. And the North Cross shopping mall is very close to where the ICBY store is. Mm-hmm. And they start investigating these two. And Maurice Pierce's story is weird from the beginning because he's like, yeah, I was with my buddy Forrest that night. We were cruising around with some of our other friends, Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott. And when I last saw Forrest, he had the .22 and said he wanted to do something that night with the gun. And then later, he says that Forrest told him that he killed the girls, that he and somebody else, some skinhead guy that he met down at the river or the creek. There was this creek behind the shop where a lot of these teenage kids would kind of hang out and drink beer, smoke pot, things like that. And that's the story that Maurice Pierce tells to Austin Police Department. They investigated that 8 days after these homicides back in 1991. So the girls were killed on a Friday night, December 6th, 1991. Mm-hmm. They investigate this then and determine that this is all bullshit. They even mic'd up. They put a wire on Maurice trying to get Forrest to repeat saying that stuff to him. And Forrest says, Maurice basically says, like, we're boys. You know, I was joking around, right? Like, I didn't kill those girls. I was joking around. I was just saying dumb stuff. And the Austin PD decided then in 1991, these guys weren't worth investigating. And in fact, it's been reported so many different ways that I don't even know what's the truth, but I'll take a stab at it. That .22, the ballistics on that .22 didn't match up with the ballistics for the .22 that they were looking for. And it's been reported that they did match. It's been reported that it didn't match, and it's been reported that at best it was inconclusive. And they tested that multiple times and could never, because what happens is they forget all about these 4 teenage boys until many years later when they have a task force and they're going back and they're starting the case, the investigation all over again. And they see this Maurice Pierce who was picked up for the gun. And even though APB or APD didn't like it in 91, these new detectives decide we're going to pursue this, and they pursue it to the point of they get a confession from Robert Springsteen and a confession from Michael Scott. And because they didn't get a confession from Maurice Pierce and didn't get a confession from Forrest Wellborn, those two guys are never taken to trial. But those are the two guys that led you to the other guys. So that, I mean, you can see it's a shoestring case, and they get a conviction on both of those guys. I think they spent, what, Bill, maybe 8 years in prison, something of that.
They were convicted in 2001, 2002, and then they got out in 2006.
Okay, so they spent years in prison.
Yep.
When they were released, I don't know what it is today, but when they were released, I think it's $80,000 a year that you can receive in damages for being wrongfully convicted in the state of Texas. Now, that's not life-changing money. I wouldn't trade a year in prison for $80,000.
No,
that's just me. That's just me. I like my freedoms, and I like not being surrounded by violent men. So that's just me. Maybe some people would take the payday. I don't know, but so yeah. Look, his DNA, Robert Eugene Brashers, his MO matches, and you had mentioned, casing the joint. I think absolutely. I think you're spot on with that. I think he had to have at least gone into the store that night or prior to that night. Right. And the reason I say that is if you review this guy's criminal history, rape and sexual assault is the motivator for this dude.
Yes.
For every crime he commits, that's the number one reason that he's committing these other crimes. You can say, hey, well, he robbed somebody in every case. Great. But
they will say that anytime, just because if somebody takes a freaking a can of Coke, they'll add robbery on.
Exactly. But here we have a guy that is raping at all of these different crime scenes, multiple victims over and over and over again. That is the driving force, the evil driving force behind this man's crimes. He's robbing because he's already there. Why not?
Yeah. Completely.
There are thousands of men that rob and never rape. And this guy was not one of them. So I think he probably saw, and a lot of his victims, a good number of his sexual assault victims, some of them that he then later killed, were younger girls, 12 years old, 14 years old. So if he goes into this yogurt shop and sees two 17-year-old girls working by themselves, that's going to check a lot of boxes for this evil bastard. And he's going to figure out a way to do what it is that he wants to do. And whether he went into the back door later that night or he remained in the shop. See, that's another thing that comes into question here. Is the two guys, right? There's always been the talk of there were two customers left in the store that have never been identified. And that went along with their whole theory that it had to be multiple guys. And that even went along with their theory that the 4 teenage boys did it because two of those boys could have sat in the store and then let the other guys in the back after, because the front door was locked. That's not in question. We know that happened, and it should be easy to presume that it was the girls working there that night that locked the door, because we have customers who have been identified, came forward with information that were there just before 11 o'clock, that were leaving and saying, I saw two guys. I remember two guys still sitting in the store when I left. And the owners and the managers said that typical closing duties would be 10, 15 minutes before 11 to go put the key in the door. So what you do is you use a key to lock the front door from the inside.
Mm-hmm.
Or no, I'm getting this wrong.
And you'd use the key to, lock it from, you'd have to lock it from the inside.
Yeah, you lock it from the inside, and then what they do when they leave, they actually leave out the front door, and they then use that same key to lock it from the outside and slide the key back underneath the door. Because look, it's
1991.
It's 1991. Look, and in the late 90s, I worked at a pizza shop, and
it's probably not even locked.
We had one key for the pizza shop, and we had a one of those big brick ovens, Bill, that was so old, we never turned it off. We were convinced if we turned it off, it would never come back on. So I worked there for 2 years, and that oven was on for 2 years straight.
It's like the light bulb in the San Francisco Fire Department that's been on since 1908 or something like that.
So they had two keys, one that would stay with the manager that was in charge of opening the store, and then the other that was used to lock the door. So no employee took home a key other than that manager, and the manager the next day would come in, unlock from the front, retrieve the key that was slid back under the front door, and then put it back in its holding spot, its resting place, until the next night that you had to close. But he saw these girls. Now the question then becomes, did he see two girls, was unaware of the other two, that maybe they were chilling in the back like we had talked about, and was unaware that there would be two additional girls? Or he's such a monster, he may not have cared. He may have been more intrigued by additional victims. Who knows?
Well, they were younger victims, or they were younger girls. I mean, they were 15 and 13. So, it's the thing that bugs me is the different calibers of gun, and then the lingering customers that have always been there. They've always been somewhat of the boogeyman, but it was always two people. It wasn't ever just one person that was supposedly there. So, two calibers of gun, all the victims were potentially raped. We know 3 of them were. Nick, am I answering my own question? I mean, doesn't it sound like there's another perpetrator out there?
Well, so to add to this a little bit, let me, I'll pull up some of my notes. And I went through these one thing we did too. So Robert Springsteen, his alibi for the night in question, that December 6th, 1991. And keep in mind, he's being asked this several years later after the fact when they're reinvestigating and they're looking at him.
A full decade.
Yeah. And they're like, well, what were you doing that night? And he's like, well, I can't say for sure. It was, 10 years ago or whatever. But I believe that I would have been at the Rocky Horror Picture Show that night at the movie theater. And they're like, well, why would you say that? And he's like, because that's what I did every Friday night. And you're telling me this was a Friday night. And what's interesting about Springsteen, too, and I think this is another detail that gets lost in the sauce. He only lived in Austin for like 6 months or 8 months. He lived there a very short period of time. I don't even think he was there a full year. And he was originally from West Virginia and moved back there. And see, when the police department wants these 4 teenage boys who then are adults once they track them down and charge them, they're selling it too. That's why I'm not so quick to buy everything that Austin PD's selling, because they've sold me information in the past and I bought it. And so they go, of course he moved away. He didn't want to stick around. He was worried that he'd get caught. No, we know today he's absolutely 100% innocent. He moved back because that's what some people do. And
he was a teenager.
Did this on True Crime. Yeah.
It's not like he was making his own choices.
You can see in the docuseries, and I think this was on 48 Hours too, because it wasn't new to me when we saw it in the docuseries, but they show video clips. So the confessions by Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen are all videotaped because that was a protocol at the time. Would not have been protocol in 1991 when they got Maurice Pierce and other people to talk back then. So it was protocol for Austin PD to videotape all of their questionings, interrogations, whatever you want to call them, at the time that they decided to charge Springsteen and Michael Scott. On the docuseries, you can see the detectives say to Springsteen, well, you're lying. And he goes, what? He goes, you know how we know you're lying? The Rocky Horror Picture Show was not showing that night at the movie theater. And so follow me on Twitter at TCGNIC, just like True Crime Garage Nick, at TCGNIC, or follow our show at True Crime Garage on Twitter or Instagram. One thing we posted is from the Austin newspaper. We posted that the Rocky Horror Picture Show on that Friday was absolutely showing at the North Cross 6 movie theater at the North Cross Mall. That night you had Beauty and the Beast. This is going to take you back, Bill. Beauty and the Beast, My Girl. Remember My Girl?
Yeah. Macaulay Culkin.
That's the one that they thought was a kid's show because Macaulay Culkin was in it.
Yeah.
Is it the girl dies?
Macaulay Culkin gets beat. Macaulay Culkin dies from bee stings. It's terribly tragic.
Yeah. So every kid cries their eyes out thinking that they're like, you sit down with mom and dad thinking you're watching a kid's movie. And then it's like, no, this poor kid died. Anyway, My Girl, Feifel Goes West, For the Boys. I believe that's a Bette Midler deal. Little Man Tate. I think that was Jodie Foster. All I Want for Christmas, which I'm not sure what that was. But here we go. The last one listed, Rocky Horror Picture Show, rated R, midnight for that Friday. That's straight from the Austin American-Statesman newspaper, Friday. They came out Friday morning, December 6, 1991. So that was something we tweeted out to just show that they were clearly lying on that one. And look, police should be able to lie in their questioning and in their interrogation, but don't tell me that this dude doesn't have an alibi because that movie wasn't showing that night when it was. It absolutely was showing that night. There are people that have a problem with police being allowed to lie during questioning. Here's why I don't have a problem with it. Most of the people that they're questioning are lying to them, so why not level the playing field? But when it comes to this Brasher guy, here's some of the things that we learned at the press conference that took place on this Monday. They talk about the crime a little bit, saying that the perpetrator entered or remained in the store near closing time. So it's clear they still don't have a great grasp of exactly how the killer got into the store. Either he remained in there, as they said, or entered near closing time. The girls were found nude and tied up with their own clothing as ligatures and bindings. That's a detail in here that Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen could not get right during their interrogation, and they would constantly get that wrong. What were they tied up with? Rope? No. And at one point, Michael Scott even says napkins. Like they were tied up with napkins. And finally, one of them guesses that they were tied up with their own clothing. And they're like, that's right. You know, think harder, Bill. You don't know the answers to this confession to our crime, not because you didn't commit it, but because you're not thinking hard enough. There was evidence of sexual assault. All 4 victims were shot in the head, execution style with the .22. Amy Ayers was also shot with a .380 caliber. The building was set on fire. They collected DNA evidence at the time. All girls had vaginal swabs taken for DNA testing, both at the scene and at the autopsies. This was actually brilliant. This is something that doesn't happen in a lot of cases and should happen in a lot of cases. Do all your collecting that you can at the scene, and also do all the collecting you can at the autopsies. It never hurts to have too much evidence. The one fired .380 cartridge casing was located in a floor drain. So they found that casing there. There was no casings for the .22. And the manner of the fire and the manner in which the fire was extinguished made evidence collection extremely difficult. Of course it did. And then there were thousands of tips and dozens of confessions, but most led nowhere. Now that's with the exception of the Maurice Pierce, Forrest Wellborn, Robert Springsteen, and Michael Scott. And another sad part of this story too is that Maurice Pierce he's dead. He's since passed away. He died in a struggle with a police officer. Maurice Pierce certainly was no saint, but you also have to wonder how much this played into his mental state. Especially regarding law enforcement and the authorities. I mean, they wanted to try him for a quadruple homicide. They threatened to try him. They tried 2 of his friends and convicted them. And you have to wonder how does that break a man? And how's he going to respond when he's pulled over? Yeah. And in fact, a lot of these attorneys that represented these men told them, get out of the state of Texas because they're not going to leave you alone here. You will be constantly watched, and they will pull you over and harass you every chance that they get. And that's because what this case did to Austin, what it did to the state of Texas. And it's understandable. And look, as much as I can fault these guys too for handling it badly and convicting 2 of the wrong guys, I can also understand that when you are that passionate, that driven to solve a case and get justice for children, raped and murdered children, when you have someone sitting across from you, regardless of how you got to that, when they're telling you that they did it, it's really difficult. It's got to be so difficult, Bill, to just go, oh, well, I don't believe him.
As Nick and I are known to do, we ran over, of course, and I'm going to split this up into 2 episodes, but the good thing is you don't have to actually wait. So just check your feed and you should have part 2 right there waiting for you when you finish this episode. So thank you so much to Nick of True Crime Garage, the best true crime podcast on the planet, and all the time that he spent with me to discuss this incredible breakthrough in this horrific case. So again, big thanks to Nick and the True Crime Garage podcast. And again, if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can do so at BillHuffman3. Part 2 will be released immediately. So enjoy, and thank you again for tuning in to this week's episode. I'll be back next week with a brand new episode of Who Killed. Until next time, stay healthy and be safe.